Hey everyone, welcome back. We like to get fired up about the impact of education, right?
Right.
And you've sent in some amazing stories, by the way. Thanks for those.
It's inspiring stuff.
Totally. So today we're going to really zoom in on one in particular.
Okay.
Let's talk about Solomon.
Yeah, Solomon's story. I mean, talk about the power of education to drive change, right? It's right there.
Okay, so the background, and this is from the stuff you sent, it mentions he was a child minor.
Yeah, and that, let me just say, that's a whole other conversation. The conditions, the lack of, just basic
Forget education, just basic.
safety, everything.
Yeah, and then, okay, so ActionAid. They come in,
Amazing organization.
they help him escape that whole situation, thank goodness. But here's the thing. They don't just stop there.
This is what's key.
They get him into education.
Because that's the long game, isn't it? You give someone the tools,
Yeah,
you empower them.
exactly. And the best part is, he's now in a management position.
I mean, talk about upward mobility. That is incredible.
It really makes you think about the ripple effect, right? Like, he's not just in a better place, but now he's in a position to...
They lift others up, to advocate, maybe even change the whole system.
And that's the thing about education, right?
Yeah.
It has this power to create change, not just for the individual, but for everyone around them, for generations to come. Like, think about your own life for a second. Was there a moment, a teacher, a class, something that opened a door for you?
We've all had those moments, right?
Right. And those moments, they matter. They shape us.
They have a ripple effect, too. And you know what's really got me thinking about Solomon's story? We don't know what kind of management position he's in. What if he's in a place to really shake things up, to fight for those kids still stuck in those mines? That's the kind of change I'm talking about.
That's what it's all about, right? That's the power of education to drive real, lasting change.
We spent a lot of time in the dark, haven't we? Exploring the really tough reality of kids forced to work in mines.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is. But today I'm really glad we're going to shift gears a little bit, look at the other side of that coin, I guess.
Right.
Because when these kids get the chance to escape that life, the stories about how their lives transform are just incredible.
It's really remarkable. And it's, it's great to see these sources highlighting not just the problem, which we talk about a lot, but, the solutions, the things that can be done, that are being done to make a difference.
To give these kids some hope for the future.
Exactly.
So one story that really jumped out was about Solomon.
Okay.
And Solomon started working in the mines when he was just a kid, but now he's a manager at ActionAid.
Wow.
It's incredible, and I think it speaks volumes about the work that these organizations are doing.
Absolutely. Organizations like ActionAid, they play a really crucial role. They provide these former child minors with, a whole range of services.
Yeah.
Things like, access to actual formal education. They have vocational training programs, healthcare, even counseling.
Right, because it's more than just getting them out of the mines. It's about, like you said, giving them the tools they need to heal and to build a new life.
Trauma, absolutely. Addressing the trauma they've experienced.
So what kind of vocational training are we talking about here?
Or it can be, depending on the region and the resources available, things like, carpentry or tailoring, even computer literacy. It's about giving them practical skills that they can use to, get a decent job, build a future for themselves.
That makes sense. So it's one thing to give someone a chance at an education, but it's another to make sure that, that those opportunities are relevant to their situation.
Exactly.
That they can lead to real jobs and real change.
And that's a really important point to make. And, it's interesting, the sources mentioned that Solomon he initially struggled to adapt to formal education. Yeah, it just highlights how difficult that transition can be.
Yeah, I can imagine, going from the dangers of a mine to a classroom setting.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a huge adjustment. I can't even imagine the kind of challenges former child miners face when they try to make that switch.
Well, I mean, you think about it. Many of these children have missed years of schooling. So they might be dealing with really significant academic gaps.
Right.
They could be behind their peers.
Right.
And on top of that, like we were talking about before, they could be grappling with the psychological and emotional effects of the trauma that they've experienced, which can, make it really hard to concentrate and learn.
Yeah.
And then, sadly, some might even face, stigma or discrimination from peers or even teachers who aren't aware of their background or aren't sensitive to it.
That's That's a lot to overcome. I mean, it says a lot about Suleiman and the others who've been able to get out and build these incredible lives for themselves. It speaks to their resilience.
It really does.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on what what Suleiman's story tells us about, the kind of the ripple effect that these transformations can have.
It's huge because you think about it, you've got other children who are still trapped in these mines.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of hope does a story like Suleiman's, give them? What kind of, spark, could this ignite in them? His journey, it shows that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about one individual, right?
No.
It's a beacon of possibility for entire communities. When children are given the chance to learn, to thrive, it doesn't just transform their lives, it strengthens their families. It uplifts their communities.
It breaks the cycle.
Exactly.
It creates a path for future generations to pursue something different.
And that brings us to a really crucial point.
Okay.
And that's, systemic change. Because, we can talk about individual stories like Suleiman's, and they're incredibly inspiring, but, to really eradicate child labor in mines, we need to go deeper. We need to address the root causes. Things like, poverty, lack of access to education, limited economic opportunities.
Right.
These are complex issues, and they need multifaceted solutions. But, it's not enough to just, rescue children from the mines.
Mm-hmm.
It's about creating a world where those mines don't have to rely on child labor in the first place.
Right. It really makes you wonder, though, if education and this kind of support can empower people to overcome something as awful and as difficult as child labor and mining. I mean, what other challenges, what other seemingly impossible things can we overcome if we take a similar approach?
Ever get the feeling, that like the problems in the world are just so big, so overwhelming? Where do you even begin to make a dent?
It's easy to feel that way, for sure.
But then you come across a story or an organization, and it reminds you, like, whoa, the power of just one person, one action.
Right.
It can be huge. And that's what we're looking at today. Individual empowerment, specifically how ActionAid is working in underserved communities.
And what's interesting here, really fascinating, is ActionAid's approach. They're not just swooping in with like temporary fixes.
Yeah.
They're all about sustainable change, giving people the tools, the knowledge to become self-reliant, to lead their own way.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We came across this story, a former child miner, Suleiman. What's his deal?
Suleiman's story, man, it really highlights ActionAid's whole method. So they stepped in, gave him access to education, vocational training, the works, got him out of the mines.
Good start.
But then it goes way beyond that. They didn't just teach him a trade. They gave him the skills to lead, to advocate for himself and others. He's a mine manager now.
No way. From child miner to manager.
No, for real. He's pushing for safe working conditions, fair wages, the whole 9 yards. And that right there, that's the ripple effect.
Because he's living proof.
Yeah.
Proof that change is possible.
Absolutely. And it gives other people hope. Plus, he's directly impacting lives, making things better for everyone.
Man, makes you think, how many other Suleimans are out there?
Right. So much potential just waiting for a little support, And the thing is, his story, it's unique, sure, but that message, that empowerment thing, it's universal. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, that chance to make a difference, everyone deserves that.
Totally. And that's a good place to leave it, I think. But for our listeners out there, I mean, we've heard about ActionAid, amazing work they do, but what about closer to home? What small act of empowerment, maybe in our own communities, can we do? Food for thought. All right, so everyone's on the hunt for that podcast idea, right? The one that's going to have everyone hooked. Something fresh, something we haven't heard a million times before.
Right.
But also something with a little something for everyone. Well, get ready, because today we are diving into some seriously unconventional podcast concepts.
I like it already.
Ideas that blend humor and suspense and just plain fascinating content in ways you wouldn't expect. And to help us break it all down, I've got expert's name here with me.
Hello. I'm excited to dive into these concepts. What I find really fascinating here is this challenge of how do we subvert expectations,
Ooh, I like that. Subverting expectations.
Because we're talking about podcasts, yeah, but it's bigger than that. We're really talking about storytelling, about humor, and honestly, just grabbing attention in a world that's saturated with content.
It's true. And that's where these unconventional ideas come in. So let's jump right into our first concept. We're calling it Unsolved Mysteries with a Twist. Now, before you think we're just slapping a laugh track on disappearances and cold cases.
Which, by the way, not recommending.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
We're talking about finding the comedic heart of true crime. Think about those podcasts that dissect ridiculous theories with, like, super witty banter.
Yes. It's like finding that sweet spot, right? You've got shows like My Favorite Murder, right? They do such a good job of balancing genuine respect for the victims and their families with, actually funny commentary and observation.
It's not easy.
Oh, it's a tightrope walk for sure. This whole concept hinges on finding that perfect balance. Maybe it's through playful speculation about what really happened, or even, and this could be fun, creating completely fictional and outlandish evidence to lighten the mood.
Right, like we found Bigfoot's footprint at the crime scene.
Exactly. But of course, without ever making light of the actual tragedies at the heart of these stories. That's crucial.
Absolutely. It's a delicate dance, but when it's done well,
Oh, it can be magic.
it makes those tough topics more approachable while still acknowledging the weight of the mystery.
100%.
Okay, so moving from mysterious to just plain relatable, how about a podcast that dives headfirst into everyone's favorite topic, themselves?
Ooh, I like where this is going.
We're calling this one Embarrassing Stories and What We Learned from Them. It's all about tapping into those universal experiences, those moments where we look back and just cringe at our past selves.
Oh, the cringe. See, I love this concept because it embraces vulnerability, right? And vulnerability is powerful because it allows for authenticity. And listeners, they crave authenticity. People connect with that realness.
It's true, because we've all been there.
Exactly. But this idea, it's not just about laughing at bad dates and awkward encounters, though that's definitely part of it. It's about going deeper, It's about extracting those valuable life lessons, what I like to call silver linings from these experiences. How did those moments, even the cringy ones, shape who we are today?
It's finding the humor in the human experience. I love it.
That's it.
Okay, so from those relatable cringe moments, we're jumping to the purely hypothetical with our next concept. What if scenarios, real life meets the absurd. We're talking about thought-provoking questions that blend the everyday with the outrageous.
Ooh, the hypothetical. It's amazing what a simple what if can unlock in terms of creativity. I'm talking about those questions that make you pause and go, I never thought about it that way.
Right.
Like, imagine a podcast that asks, what if humans could only communicate through interpretive dance? Suddenly, every conversation is a potential disaster waiting to happen, but it's also a hilarious performance.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine trying to have a serious conversation?
The hand gestures, the footwork, it'd be chaos. But this format, it opens up a world of possibilities. It allows for social commentary, ethical dilemmas, all disguised as a ridiculous thought experiment.
It's entertainment, but with like a surprising intellectual core.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and get into something a little more grounded. How about the strange and hilarious history of everyday objects?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about taking those mundane things we completely take for granted and uncovering their bizarre and often hilarious pasts. I mean, who knew the history of the potato chip could be so dramatic?
It's true. We don't even think about it, right? But humans, we are fascinated by origins. We want to know the stories behind the stuff we interact with every day. And this concept, it taps into that curiosity perfectly. Imagine an entire episode dedicated to, say, the toothbrush.
I mean, at first glance, that sounds pretty boring.
Exactly, a mundane object, right? But when you start to dig into its history, you'll find some bizarre stuff. Suddenly, you're learning about ancient hygiene practices, social status symbols, and these weird inventions that thankfully never caught on.
Wow, it's crazy to think about.
It is. This concept is all about unearthing those quirky, forgotten narratives that make us see the familiar in a completely new light.
That's like they say, truth can be stranger and funnier than fiction.
100%.
All right, so we've covered some really intriguing concepts. But believe it or not, we had even more ideas that didn't quite make it into our top 4. And just because we couldn't cover them in detail, we didn't want to leave you completely hanging. So here are a few bonus concepts that we thought had some real potential.
Hit us with them.
Okay, so how about celebrity lookalikes? The Double Trouble panel. Imagine a panel of celebrity doppelgangers discussing the highs and lows of, well, looking like someone famous.
Oh, I love it. The stories they could tell.
Right. Okay, next up, we've got Would You Rather, but with a twist. Think really outlandish, thought-provoking dilemmas.
That's a classic for a reason. It's all in the dilemmas.
Exactly. Then there's Surviving with Style, bizarre survival tips. where we explore those wacky but weirdly effective survival hacks you never learned in scouting.
Practical and entertaining. I like it.
Right, okay, how about this? On the edge of history. Little known but wild historical events. Because let's be honest, history is full of these crazy footnotes that deserve way more attention.
Yes. Give me all the obscure history facts.
Right. And for our final bonus concept, we've got fail tales, epic fails, and how to bounce back. Because everyone loves a good comeback story.
Especially when it involves overcoming some truly epic fails. Love it.
So there you have it. A whole smorgasbord of unconventional podcast ideas, each with its own unique flavor and the potential to really grab an audience. But what did we learn today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway here is that there's a goldmine of untapped potential for those willing to get a little creative, right?
Right.
The podcasting landscape is crowded, but there's always room for fresh voices and original ideas. Don't be afraid to experiment, to blend genres, to get a little weird, and to really think outside the box.
Because who knows? That next big podcasting sensation, it might just start with a simple what if.
That's it. Keep asking those what if questions. Keep digging for those strange and hilarious stories. The world's full of untold stories just waiting to be discovered. You never know what you might uncover. And that's a wrap.